So I'm here with Randy Sutton, a retired police lieutenant with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police, a nationally known commentator on law enforcement issues, a speaker and actor on the big and small screen, and the best-selling author of 4 books on policing and the power of legacy. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, but you forgot one thing.
What's that?
I'm also the founder of a national charity called the Wounded Blue, and we are the national assistance and support organization for injured and disabled law enforcement officers.
Absolutely, I did. I forgot the most important thing.
It's all right. I reminded you.
Yeah. Let's start at the beginning. Where are you from originally?
I was born in Princeton, New Jersey, and went to high school there. And then right out of high school, I actually joined the Princeton Police Department. I was 19 years old when I joined the first police department that I worked at, and I worked there for 10 years. I was a patrol officer for 6, a detective for 4, and a small department, right? It was a 30 officer department in a college town, and quite honestly, I was bored to death. So I decided I needed more action. And where do you go for action? Las Vegas.
Okay.
So I actually started my career all over again after 10 years on the job. Had to go through the academy again, go through field training again, and literally start my career all over. And then I did 24 years with Las Vegas Metro and retired as a lieutenant.
That's amazing. And you were on the show Cops when you were on Las Vegas Police. How did that come about?
Yeah. So in the weird way that the world works, in 1989 was the second season of the TV show Cops, and they came to Las Vegas. Now, the way they choose people to film is they always film they almost always film on the afternoon evening shift, so it would be swing shift, and I was working swing shift, and they would go to the supervisors and say, who do you think would be somebody good to ride with, because we want, they want action, right? So they want somebody that's an aggressive cop, and I fit that bill. But they don't just randomly throw a film crew in with you. They send a producer with a handheld camera to basically do a screen test, if you will. What they really are looking for is if you act naturally, or if you play up to the camera, so because there are those that do that, and they just want somebody that would act naturally and get them some stuff. So the afternoon that the producer rode with me, right out of the shoot, we got a call that wound up being very, very funny. This guy was cleaning a pool, and there was some disturbance there, and he started chasing me around with the big long net, and he's trying to hit me with the net, and it was very comical. So excuse me, my dog is barking. Rocky, stop. Sorry about that. So anyway, he said, we're riding with you, and they wound up riding 3 seasons with me. I was actually one of the most featured officers on the show. So it was as a patrol officer in 1989, and then in 94 as a sergeant, then 96 as a sergeant. And then when I got promoted to lieutenant, they said, we don't want to ride with you because lieutenants don't do anything. So, they had 3 good seasons with me, and they got some really good material.
Yeah, Cops was an iconic show. I watched that all the time when I was a little kid. And I guess being on Cops, it led to you being able to appear in the Academy Award-winning film Casino with Robert De Niro and Sharon Stone.
Yeah, it was just because they had a producer or a casting director, excuse me, had seen me on Cops, and I get a phone call one day, and he says to me, "There's going to be a film shot in Vegas, and the director is looking for realism in the part of a police officer. Would you be willing to come down and do an audition?" And I said, absolutely. I love adventure, right? So I walk into this suite at the old Riviera Hotel, and who's standing there but Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese.
Wow.
And usually as an actor yourself, they usually give you the lines to read. They call them sides. They give you the sides, and then you interact with the director to do the scene. But I started telling them war stories about being a Vegas cop, and they threw the lines away. They just said, "You got the part," and that's how I got in the Screen Actors Guild and did my first real role in a movie. And turned out that I ad-libbed the entire scene with Robert De Niro, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, and then you ended up in like a couple other films like Fools Russian, Miss Congeniality. And then I had a co-starring role opposite James Caan in the pilot episode of Las Vegas. What was that experience like?
Well, okay, I'll tell you a funny story about that. So when I got the part in the pilot episode of Las Vegas, and I knew that I was going to be acting with the James Caan, and in almost every role that I did, I played a cop. Well, this time I got to play a bad guy, and that was pretty fun. Except James Caan was not a very pleasant fellow to work with.
I've heard that.
Yeah, and he kind of ruined the experience for me because I was looking forward to working with him. I mean, here's an iconic actor, right? He acted with John Wayne, for God's sake. He was in The Godfather, so I was really looking forward to working with him. And the minute I saw him in action, it was like, nah, this is disappointing.
Wow.
But
What
we've
was
seen that
about it though specifically? Was it like just he was just difficult, because
all right, so this was my introduction to him. I was in the makeup trailer getting my makeup put on, and I heard excuse me, I heard this screaming outside, and it was coming closer, and it was really vile stuff. It was someone screaming at someone else, and it was insulting, it was degrading, and it was getting louder and louder. And then the door opens, and who is it that's screaming? But it was James Caan screaming at his production assistant these vile things, calling him vile names because he got his eggs wrong.
Wow.
And it was like, oh my God. Then he sat in the chair and he's talking to no one but himself, saying, I'm a movie star. I shouldn't even be doing this television bullshit. And I'm going, oh man, this is not what I expected.
Right.
So that was that. And for the rest of the time that I was on set with him, he just wasn't a nice guy. Didn't treat people nicely.
That's unfortunate. I guess at the end of your law enforcement career, there was like a series of life-changing events that took place. You were involved in an officer-involved shooting. Could you talk about that?
So, I told you I left Princeton PD because I wanted more action, right? Well, be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you get it. And in my entire career as a cop in Princeton, I never used my weapon, because in all reality, only 5% of police officers ever use their weapons in the line of duty. It's not like people think from television and movies where cops get in gunfights all the time. It's very, very, very rare. So I was still on probation when I was in my first shooting, and it was a 15-year-old who tried to ambush me. Wow. It was I was working graveyard shift, and I was patrolling an area that was had a lot of gang warfare going on. I got involved in a pursuit with a stolen vehicle.
Is it like North Las Vegas or
right near North Las Vegas? Right, my sector beat bordered North Las Vegas. So it's like 2:00 in the morning, getting a pursuit, stolen car. They crash. I chase after one guy. My partner chases after another, and I'm right on his butt, but I can't quite reach out and grab him. And he runs around the corner of a building, and I run around the corner of the building. I've got my gun in my hand, and he's waiting for me with the gun to shoot me. And I instinctually fired my weapon, and he was standing right next to a house, and the bullet zinged right by his ear, hit the stucco building. A piece of the stucco broke off and hit him in the head, and he thought he was shot. So he couldn't he couldn't throw that gun away fast enough. And then I came to find out he was 15 years old. So that's where you realize the reality of big city policing when something like that happens. That was when I was still on probation, and then in the ensuing years, I was in several shootings. Now, what ended my career was that I suffered a stroke in my police car, and 3 weeks before I had that experience, my mother died in my arms.
I'm sorry.
And 2 months before that, I was in another fatal shooting. So there was a lot happening in my life at the time, a lot of loss. And then on this particular night, the last night of my career, I was the watch commander, which meant that I was the highest ranking officer on duty. And whenever I was the watch commander, I would take a patrol officer with me so I could get to know my people. So I'm riding with this kid. He's never ridden with me before. It's 2:30 in the morning. We're right in front of Bally's Hotel on the Las Vegas Strip, and I'm talking to him like I'm talking to you right now. And suddenly, I found myself talking slower, and I knew that I knew right away I was having a stroke, and I had no control over it. And I stopped the police car, and I told him, "Get me medical. I'm having a stroke." And this poor kid's looking at me like, "What? What's going on here?" And I got out of the car to go around to the passenger side in case he needed to get me to the hospital, and then started speaking gibberish. And I had no control. And then I lost the ability to speak. I lost the ability to move. And I crumpled to the pavement. And that's where my career ended, on in the gutter of Las Vegas Boulevard, with tourists walking by me, taking pictures of me, laying there helpless. And I got to tell you, I've been in some scary moments, Ryan, but that was the most frightening moment of my life. And I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of living like that. And once again, that guardian angel that I've had on my shoulder my entire career was with me again that night. And the clot went through my brain and, left some damage, but certainly not what it could have been. But that ended my career. So that, on top of losing my mom and all the stress of being involved in a shooting, it was a really, really difficult time for me. That I was a cop my entire life,
Right.
and suddenly I'm not anymore, and I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what the direction of my life is going to be. And I had written 3 books by that time. One you can see right behind me. This was my first book, True Blue: Police Stories by Those Who Have Lived Them. And I wrote that book. Now, I've had a number of life-changing experiences as a cop. And one of them was saving the life of a 1-month-old baby who had been shot in the face in a drive-by shooting. And I wrote, after that happened, it was such an impacting moment for me. I had to just write the story. I wasn't a writer. I just felt like I needed to get it out, So I picked up my pen and my yellow pad, and I wrote the story. It's called Her Name Was Jackie. And I didn't have anything to do with it, so I just stuck it in a drawer, and it sat there for 3 years. And then the World Trade Center was attacked, and I felt helpless. I wanted to do something for the families of the police officers killed in that horrible attack. It was the deadliest day in law enforcement history. So I thought about that story that was sitting in that drawer, and I said, you know what? Every cop I know has a story like this. I'm going to ask them to write it for me, and I'm going to put it in a book, and I'm going to donate all the proceeds to the officers' families. And that's exactly what I did. And that led to my writing career. I followed up by a book called A Cop's Life, which were all my own stories, which still is available today on Amazon. And then a third book was a second edition of True Blue, which I donated to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. And then after the stroke, and I was helpless, I didn't know what the direction of my life was going to be. And then the doctor said, Randy, you have a serious, serious heart condition, and that's what caused your stroke. And you need to prepare yourself for your own mortality. And I didn't expect that one, Ryan. That came out of left field. So I'm thinking about my own death and what's my legacy going to be? And I happened to be watching television, and I saw an interview with a guy named Frank Shankwitz. Now, that name might not mean anything to you, but what he created will.
Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Exactly. Make-A-Wish Foundation. And very few people know that a cop is the one who created the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Frank was an Arizona State Trooper for 40 years. And hearing his story, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I said, I want to talk to people like that about who it was that inspired them. And out of that, the book, The Power of Legacy, Personal Heroes of America's Most Inspiring People came about. And that book changed my life. Writing the book changed my life and gave me a new purpose and a new direction. And then what happened was unbelievable to me. And that was that my own department turned its back on me and said, we're not paying your medical bills. We're not giving you your benefits. And that look that you just had on your face was the same look I had on my excuse me, on my face. I said, what do you mean you're not paying my medical? You have to pay my medical bills. It's the law. Yeah, well, that's true, but make us. And that, I had to get a lawyer. I had to go fight them in court. They spent tens of thousands of dollars in taxpayers' money fighting me, knowing that they had to pay, knowing they had to give me my benefits. But I came to find out a very, very harsh reality, Ryan. They knew it would take over a year, and their bet was that I would die in the meantime.
Wow.
Now that's a startling thought, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, that, that people would, put like your life, especially like, you're someone who saved lives, you're really like, good cop, and I think like, we live in a society where like, there aren't a lot of like, cops like you could say like, are heroes sometimes, and you exemplify like heroic behavior, and did the right thing, like, so I think like, that's kind of like a betrayal of like, the system.
It was a betrayal. It's exactly the word. And I was shocked. And it was a very lonely place to be. I mean, I even went in to see my sheriff, a guy who I'd served with for 24 years. And I said, how do you treat me like this? And he looked me dead in the eye and said, Randy, this isn't personal. It's just business. And that's exactly what it was, Ryan. Now, that set the tone for my new life. Because from being in television and being on the movies and writing books and being a police trainer for decades, cops started reaching out to me on Facebook, of all things. And they didn't know me. They only knew who I was because I was so visible in the law enforcement community. And they said, Randy, these were heartbreaking messages. Randy, I got shot. My chief never even came to visit me in the hospital. They're not paying my medical bills. Randy, I was hit by a car. They've thrown me away. I mean, one after another from all over the country. And they all ended, I feel abandoned and I feel alone. And I knew that feeling very, very well. And I looked for resources for them and discovered that there were no national resources for these men and women. So I created it. And that is the Wounded Blue. And we are the national resource for injured and disabled law enforcement officers. I have a team of cops who are amazing. Every one of us has been shot, stabbed, beaten, run over, screwed up, and screwed over. And they're all over the country. And we provide peer support for other injured and disabled cops. We've helped more than 14,000 in the last 5 years that we've been active. So that, from the terrible loss that I had, those dark, dark days, came something that I was called to do. And, when we think sometimes that the worst possible thing happens to us, from that, we can rise like a phoenix and go through our pain and create something that will touch the lives of others.
Telling me that it reminds me, like, in society, like right now, it feels like there's a uh people are trying to paint law enforcement as the whole community is corrupt and immoral. And we know that's not true. And like, what you're describing though is like, that I wasn't even aware, like, that police officers, like, are not being treated fairly if they get injured on the job. Like, how common is that?
It's very common, and this is the dirty secret that I didn't know. Listen, I was a cop for 34 years. I just assumed if I got hurt in the line of duty, my department was going to take care of me. But in fact, I have a documentary film. I urge any of your viewers to go to Amazon.com and put in The Wounded Blue. You'll see our documentary film. It'll blow your mind. The stories that we depict in this documentary will shock you, and they're from stories from all over the country. So it's a real problem, and and it leads to police suicide. And police suicide is this is something we rarely talk about too. But 2 to 5 times the number of officers who get killed in the line of duty will die by their own hand, and that's a startling statistic. So that's the Wounded Blue helps. And we recognize injuries as either physical or emotional, psychological, and they're just as real. So what we do is critically important. We literally save lives, and I have, like I said, my peer team are true heroes. Despite some of them are in wheelchairs forever, some of them, have are blind. I mean, we have from all the different injuries, and they still continue to serve. Ryan, that's heroic.
It is. I definitely would agree. Like, there are a lot of heroic police officers. How do you feel though? Like, it seems like the media, the mainstream media at least, paints like, police, like, that they're all corrupt, like I was saying earlier. And that it would seem like a lot of people who watch this interview, unfortunately, would say like, that they wouldn't have sympathy for police officers.
Exactly, and the reality is far different. There are cops who cross the line. Hell yeah, and that's why it's necessary to take action against them quickly and efficiently and get rid of them. But there are so many. The vast majority are out there acting heroically every single day, and I tell you, one of the things that the public rarely sees is the compassion and empathy that police officers have. I have seen so many incredible acts of kindness and empathy in my police career from guys who do these acts of kindness, not with fanfare. No one would know about it. They just do it. They act in a ways, that I've seen guys buy bicycles for kids. I've seen guys, furnish apartments because the family had no money. Nobody knows about it. They just do it. And this is one of the things that I was very prideful about in my career, is being able to play that role. And when people are at their worst, sometimes an act of compassion and empathy can change their life around. And that's the beauty of being a cop. It's just rarely ever highlighted or even talked about.
The U.S. has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Our country incarcerates hundreds of thousands of people who are not a threat to public safety. What do you think can be done to fix that problem?
Well, actually, I think quite the opposite. I don't think we incarcerate enough people. The fact of the matter is, our criminal justice system has been defiled by politics. In the name of reform, and as a result of that, we're seeing the worst crime in American history is taking place right now. The violent crime is out of control in almost every major city.
Yeah.
And what's causing that? Well, I'll tell you what's causing it. We're not putting the right people in jail at the appropriate moments. So here's the reality. The majority of violent crime is committed by a very small percentage of people. That's the reality. So what we have to do as a society, if someone commits violent crime, and they're not, these aren't single instances. I'm talking about people who are serial robbers or serial rapists. Those people need to be removed from society, and they need to be put in a place where they can't hurt anybody else. And that, unfortunately, is the prison system. And when we were putting those people,
got a question for you though, like,
yeah,
because I think there's an argument to say that, poverty in America is criminalized, and our justice system, it treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent, though. Would you agree with that though?
well, I will definitely say that if you have money and you can hire the best lawyers, you're going to have a better chance of maneuvering through the criminal justice system. That's a fact. But the system itself. So let's talk about the criminal justice system. Okay, the system is this: the police investigate crimes, make arrests, and that's the entry to the system. It then goes to the prosecutorial people, whether a district attorney or a prosecutor, and it's up to them to prosecute these cases, to look at each of the facts, determine, where the evidence lies, and prosecute. Then it goes to the judiciary to sentence. Okay, if one of the aspects of that system doesn't work, then the system itself is screwed. So what we have seen is the initiation of prosecutors who are not interested in prosecuting. They're social justice warriors, and what that in effect does is it allows criminality. And once that begins, that you have the no bail, low bail nonsense, where there is literally a revolving door of people literally getting arrested and leaving that same day to go out and victimize again, and no one is held accountable.
What about the issues though of like drug addiction and mental illness? Because like, a lot of criminals, they suffer from those.
Oh, and those are a factor in things that take place. Mental illness, that's a pretty big scope that you're talking about. Okay, you can literally say that everybody that commits some weird freaking crime is mentally ill.
Yeah,
but society still needs to be protected from that, right? Now,
100%.
now, years ago, probably before you were born, there was a system in place of mental hospitals, psychiatric hospitals. And that was a place where people were removed to for care. Was it the greatest care? No. But at least it allowed the law enforcement and society to take these people who were in need of treatment and force them to get treatment. Then, under the Reagan, when Reagan was president, the court ruled that being mentally ill is not a crime. And virtually almost every one of those psychiatric hospitals was shuttered. Well, now where are all those people? You can see them in the encampments all over San Francisco and LA and et cetera, and there's no care for them.
I have a huge question about that. Like, why, like, aren't these cities doing something about, like, these tents? Like, I'd be like, very upset. Like, if I lived in Los Angeles and I'm paying $2,000 a month for rent, and there's somebody, outside living in my neighborhood, like in a tent. My brother, he lives in a luxury apartment in Denver. There's homeless people and stuff. Like 2 have died in the last month. So it just seems like, that they should be doing something about these issues.
They should. You're absolutely right, but they're not, because the politics of our new society simply won't hold people responsible. Doesn't hold the politicians responsible. These people who get elected, they get elected to protect their people. That's what they're supposed to do, but they aren't doing it. And in the name of social justice, they're allowing the bodies to stack up on the street in the name of social justice. So who is to blame? Well, the many cases it's the city politicians. I mean, and here's Oregon's perfect example. They are now recriminalizing drugs
Okay.
because they just made everything legal. And what happened? Bodies are stacking up on the streets from overdoses.
You might as well say that's like LA too, because you see like people.
Yes.
I've had like videos on my YouTube channel where people were like selling fentanyl, like right out in the open, and it seems like law enforcement. You see people going into the mass looting, like people just running out of stores, like
Right.
skyrocketing the prices for people who pay, the regular price. It seems crazy. Um, you know, being a Las Vegas police officer, I have to ask you this question. For 25 years, police say they had known of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis' involvement in the murder of Tupac Shakur, but he was just arrested recently. Why did it take so long for him to be arrested?
Because they had to put a case together that would hold water, and there was,
Even though he wrote a book,
yeah,
he
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
and I wasn't involved in that, although
right.
my patrol squad was the first responding squad to
Okay.
his murder. But when you have people that have firsthand knowledge of it and they refuse to cooperate with the police, then you don't have a case. You got to have a case that with witnesses, with forensic evidence. Otherwise, you can know. Believe me, there's plenty of people I know have committed serious crimes, but I couldn't arrest them because I didn't have the evidence. So that is our system. If you don't have the evidence, you can't arrest them. But here's the other part of that problem. We're putting cases together, and the prosecutors are just saying we're not going to prosecute because he's a victim of the economic downturn or some bullshit like that. So society needs to be protected. People need to be held accountable, and it's not happening in this new age. Is no one is being held accountable for their behaviors. And you can make all the excuses in the world, mental illness, poverty. It doesn't matter. When it comes down to it, we are responsible for our own actions, and we need to be held accountable for our own actions. And if I put a gun in somebody's face, doesn't matter if I didn't get if I didn't have enough money that day. It's a bullshit excuse. So if until we start holding people accountable for their own behaviors, we're going to continue to see innocent people dying. Now, I want to go back to where we were about decriminalizing drugs and what that has led to. We now have literally bodies stacking up in the streets.
Right.
So why is it important to criminalize drugs? And here's the real reason: because that is the gateway to help. I can't tell you the number of people who I arrested who years later found me and said, "Thank you, you saved my life." And every cop I know has this same exact experience, because that gives impetus to get help. Without that, there is no impetus to get help. And that's why those who think that they're doing something for society by decriminalizing drugs, they're the ones that are responsible for the deaths of literally thousands of people across this United States.
Most definitely. I wanted to get your thoughts on one last thing. I was reading the news today, and Chicago Police Sergeant John Ulus, whose fatal shootings of two men led to about $2 million in city hall payouts, is now running for judge in Cook County with the help of a Democratic Party insider and $500,000 in loans from his wife. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not familiar with it. I haven't even heard about this guy. But let me say this about payouts from cities. City governments, when there's an officer involved shooting, they will rarely fight it. They just pay it out, and that's very unfortunate, because that has a lot of ramifications. First of all, it makes the cops look guilty of something because the city didn't defend them. That decreases morale, which decreases the function of law enforcement. It also emboldens more and more lawsuits. So if I know whether or not there's merit to this lawsuit or not, I know that I'm going to get a payout. Well, I'm going to sue the shit out of the city,
Right.
whether or not it's justified or not. So, so simply because there were payouts made from
doesn't mean like
a
you
shooting,
wrong or yeah.
right? So, and I don't know the merits of the shooting, so I can't comment on that. But it isn't black and white like it might look.
I understand that. Man, I really enjoyed speaking with you. What's next for the Wounded Blue?
Well, I urge anybody that's watching this to find out who we are and see what we do. Go to thewoundedblue.org and see who we are, see what we do. And if you can donate, we're a nonprofit. We everything that we take in goes to help others. I take no salary. I live on my pension. And all of our funds go to help others. So if you can give $10 a month, you can give whatever you can give. We would sincerely appreciate it. We are a charity. Everything you do is tax deductible, of course. And we've got something very, very cool happening though. We've got some amazing things in the works. I'm working with some country music artists that are supportive of law enforcement. We're going to be doing some pretty cool stuff. So check out the
Can you name any of the artists? Any of the artists?
Oh yeah, I mean, a litany of artists. Dolly Parton, George Strait.
I love Dolly Parton.
Kid Rock, Travis Tritt. I've got Reba McEntire, Brooks and Dunn, Toby Keith. All of these country artists are coming together to help the Wounded Blue.
That's amazing. Randy Sutton, I really appreciate you taking the time. I reached out to you today, just called you and we were able to make it happen. So I thank you.
You're very welcome. Good to talk to you.
You too. Have a great day.
Take care.